I'll be learning as you are on air about where the money has come this morning. And it's definitely worth noting that for the purpose of an opening line report, I'm not going to try to make predictions and give you emergency betting alerts. For this show, preseason betting comes on information, and we don't have the information to tell you where the lines are going to move just yet. Drew?
Fair enough, Teddy. I'm picking up what you're laying down. So, hey, guys, we got Thursday, August 15th. We got Saturday, August 17th. And we got Sunday, August 18th coming your way. So a lot of games on Saturday. That's a huge slate. So we can get after it now, Teddy, if you're ready to rock.
Absolutely. Let's roll, baby.
All right, guys, setting it up here. 401, 402, the rotation number, 7 o'clock Eastern time. It is Thursday. Philadelphia Eagles, New England Patriots, 36 being the total. There is a 36 and a hook out there, Teddy. -2 and a hook across the board. That is the Patriots as the short home favorite.
And this is your line mover, worthy of note. Again, we're talking about the last couple hours right here. Philly open -2.5, total 33.5. Now it's New England -2.5, total 36, juice to the over in a lot of books. So it's been heavy Patriots money and heavy over money this morning. You should understand it. Look, Philadelphia hasn't shown a whole lot of interest in winning games in the Nick Sirianni era in the preseason. We saw them beat Baltimore over the weekend. That was Baltimore beating themselves. Baltimore fumbled in their own territory with just over 2 to play, and Philly kicked the game-winning field goal to win. But nothing appears to have changed in terms of the Eagles' desire or lack of desire to win games in August. It wasn't a bet on QB rotation. It wasn't a bet on team in that ballgame. They found an opponent they could beat. New England, too good though. I mean, there's a couple things that betting markets like about New England and why we're seeing over money. First, we're seeing the Patriots QB rotation bet on. We talk about we're going to see more Jacoby Brissett this week. One would think he didn't complete a pass in the open. We're going to see more Drake May this week. I got no problem with Bailey Zappi against a third-string defense. He performed fairly well in that role this past week. I don't know if we're going to see more Joe Milton or not. But the bottom line is Patriots QB rotation has shown bet on potential, at least early this preseason. And, of course, from a defensive standpoint, all the quotes from Jared Mayo were, we like what our defense showed this past week. We're going to do more of the same next week, which isn't necessarily an overquote. But considering Philly didn't do anything on offense and New England didn't do a whole lot on offense in the first game, the markets are expecting more points second time around. And certainly with that QB rotation for the Patriots, that is a potential. Don't know yet who's going to be playing for Philadelphia. The markets are saying don't expect Jalen Hurts very much, if at all, in this one.
Off and running, guys. One game in the books. We don't have any games on Friday, it looks like, Teddy, but Saturday, August 17th, we got, 9 a.m. Pacific time here. Atlanta Falcons, Baltimore Ravens. Falcons -1 as the road favorite. 37 being the total.
Yeah, and of course, usually in the preseason, it's not uncommon. We'll see a Thursday game, Friday game, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Not uncommon to have games being played in 5 straight days. That's not the case in week 2. Won't be the case again in week 3. Week 2, we have the one Thursday game, most of the games on Saturday, and then 2 games on Sunday. No Monday Night Football, which is kind of a bummer. I always like doing this show and having Monday Night Football that night. But I don't even know if there's a Monday night. I don't know there's a Monday Night Football after week 3 either. I have to look to be sure. But the bottom line is this week we're not having the action every day. Falcons and the Ravens. Atlanta opens -2, total 35.5. And again, this is just this morning, so these lines are just moving around right now. We're seeing money for Baltimore. Baltimore -1 at some books, +1 at other books. Total's been bet up from 35.5 to 37 against the Falcons. And it's worth noting this for Atlanta. Atlanta lost 20-13. No Kirk Cousins in that game. Michael Penix got plenty of looks. They scored 13 points. The quotes after the game from McDonald, Miami's head coach, is, we were playing a bunch of defensive guys out of position. I thought our defense played really well considering. Which you have to look at the Atlanta side there and say, here's Miami playing a bunch of defensive guys out of position. They have cluster injuries, and Atlanta's offense still didn't work. Remember, this is the Falcons' offense that last year underachieved in many ways. And we don't know yet if we're going to see any Kirk Cousins this preseason. I was looking at stuff this late last night, and it was all questions, maybe, maybe not. The early money for Baltimore may be saying, yeah, Cousins not likely to be in the lineup here, much like last week. And of course, remember, the Ravens had won 24 preseason games in a row, a pretty big betting bandwagon. They've now lost 3 straight and not playing the type of second half football that they were for the majority of that extended winning streak. The Ravens preseason, again, you look at the long-term stats, you say Baltimore's bet on every game. Well, the markets faded them last week. They're fading them here so far, and they lost now 3 in a row in August.
Yeah, that run seems to be over, at least for now, in the NFLX for the Ravens. We got 10 a.m. Pacific kick for the next one, 4:05, 4:06, New York Giants, Houston Texans. Texans -3, pretty much across the board, 39 and a hook being the total here, Teddy.
Yeah, Texans open 5.5. And now we're looking at 3s. And again, we're not talking about 100 books with these line openers just yet. And there are many books that still haven't opened these numbers yet. But the early markets have moved significantly towards the G-men against the Texans, which is a little bit of a surprise. The Texans took money in the last week, a fair bit of money. And the Texans have in the game against Pittsburgh. And make no mistake about it, the Texans have a bet on QB rotation for August. And it showed in each of their first 2 preseason games in the markets. Certainly from an opening number standpoint, the markets are paying attention. Now, again, I don't know if we're going to see Stroud here. If we do, I don't expect to see him a whole lot for the Texans. But whether he plays or not, and again, he probably get a cup of coffee. Davis Mills, Case Keenum, Tim Boyle, 3 guys, all of whom have fairly recent NFL starting experience. That is a bet on QB trio, and certainly something that the markets will take notice. That being said, the Giants didn't play any starters against the Lions last week. And it was a game that was played. It was a wet field. There was a light rain. They had multiple joint practices during the week, and a bunch of fights in those practices. And Brian DeBall was like, yeah, we'll sit our starters here. I don't necessarily expect that to be the case for this game, and neither to the markets. I believe that's why the early money has come for the New York Football Giants, coming off that double-digit win against Detroit.
NFL opening line report, NFLX preseason, breaking it down, 2 games in the books here. Teddy, you brought up the market not being, I guess, fully mature right now. I got a question for you. And guys, fire away any questions in the comments below, live chat as well here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. What differences do you see in the lines being released in the NFL preseason compared to the regular season? One thing I'd throw out there is, by this time doing the NFL opening line report with you, in the NFL regular season, every book would have side and total. Whereas right now,
Yes.
it's really just DraftKings and then the offshore market.
So there's a handful of books that have numbers up now. Okay. Whether you're talking about global books, whether you're talking about books in the States, there's enough of a market that we can talk about it. But it's compared to the regular season, there's nothing doing. Right? In the regular season, you have look-ahead lines. We talk about the look-ahead line. So you have every game for next week lined on Tuesday and Wednesday. So we have a clear indicator of how much one week is going to affect a point spread, or the results of one week's games are going to affect the point spread. The lines open everywhere on Sunday, and they are getting bet into heavily by Sunday night, and we call them fairly mature by Monday morning. Here, half the books haven't posted yet, and the reason they haven't posted yet is they're letting the other books take all the heat. Make no mistake about it, when it comes to preseason lines, I sat there last night and really tried to make some numbers for a while, and I'm like, these are garbage. I don't know what the hell number to put up for this game. They're not any good until you get information from coaches about what the game plan is going to be. So you see that in the markets. Everything's 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5 in that range. And then the betting markets say, nah, here's some info we can bet on, and they bet it. Obviously, that won't be the case for the regular season. So when it comes to lining these games, the books don't know a whole lot more than we do. The advantage they have, they're getting -110 on both sides. And they're winning at least some of the games where we're seeing big line moves. And that's all a bookmaker can ask for.
Like it, Teddy. All right, we got 10 a.m. Pacific kick here, 407, 408, Cincinnati and Chicago. We got the Bears -3 across the board, 37 and a hook being the total.
Yeah, the Bears played really well in their opener. They played pretty well in the Hall of Fame game as well, but it felt like Chicago was at a different speed than Buffalo in that win over the Bills for extended stretch. And of course, they didn't take advantage of their red zone chances early. It was a competitive game into the fourth quarter. But the Bears were the better team in that ball game, and the energy level for the Bears was legitimately good. You know, everyone's speaking volumes about Caleb Williams' preseason success in that ball game. He didn't lead the team into the end zone, but he did lead a couple successful drives, converted on third downs, both with his feet and with his arm. The Bears' offensive line, which had quote-unquote cluster injuries going into that game, pretty much dominated the Bills up front. Buffalo got no pressure in that ballgame, which made things look much easier for Williams and his backups, DJ Moore. It was great. Everybody was open. Yeah, it gives you a hell of a lot of confidence going into the season. Positive things for Chicago, but of course that was last week. We'll see it again this week. The markets tend to think so. The Bears have now played well offensively in each of their first 2 preseason games. Since he didn't necessarily, Jake Browning had a rough game. Jake Browning, who had a great was solid last year in replacement of Joe Burrow. He had 18 pass attempts for 52 yards in the first half. He played into the third quarter because the first half was so bad it wasn't any better there. Logan Woodside played better later in the game, but Cincy, not necessarily a team that is caring a lot in the Zach Taylor era about wins and losses in August. It showed on the field, and certainly it showed in this point spread, although there's been a little bit of early money for the over. And again, we saw a whole lot of unders in week 1. A little bit of early money for the over here. And that's pretty much a theme for this. I haven't seen any. I'm looking down the WagerTalk live odds screen, and there's been money for the over. It looks like someone came in and bet it over the total in every single game. They just bet the board. So it's not an opinion about any one game. It's an opinion after totals went 12-4 to the under this last week, after last year was a big over year in preseason football. The markets, someone out there is saying, I like all the overs this week. I'm not convinced any of these is an opinion move in a real sense. It's much more of this market is a little bit too low. Let's bet them all over. We'll cash, in theory, more than we lose.
Like the breakdown, Teddy, as we got Detroit Lions, Kansas City Chiefs up next, 1 o'clock Pacific kick here. We get another one, 36.5 I'm seeing as the over. Now it's 38.5, -4. That's KC as the home favorite.
Yeah, interesting. So you expect a little bit more of the Chiefs starters in this one, and the Chiefs starters are going to get betting market respect. Kansas City didn't play great in the preseason debut against Jacksonville. Their special teams were off. The Jags had a bunch of long returns. They nearly had 3 special teams touchdowns in that ball game. A lot of problems in coverage for KC. The offense didn't click. The defense wasn't that good. Andy Reid, is he concerned? Quote, we'll get it cleaned up. Doesn't sound too worried in that regard. I talked a minute ago about the Lions-Giants game and how both coaches were like, I'm not risking anyone. We got a wet field. Let's not screw around. They already had the joint practices earlier in the week. So Detroit, we're not going to take a lot away from that contest. But again, they went 5 of 17 on third down, 0 of 4 on fourth down, 0 of 3 in the red zone. So it wasn't like they executed particularly well. Dan Campbell, quote, certainly wasn't our best performance. But, man, there were some guys that showed up, and it's going to be a great tape for us to evaluate. Campbell always positive. But that certainly wasn't our best performance. One might expect a little bit more intensity this week from the Lions after a game where they pretty much no-showed.
We got 411, 412 up next, 125 Pacific kick here. It's the Vikings at the Browns. 38 being the total here, Teddy. -3 flat across the board. That's Cleveland as the home favorite hosting the Vikings.
Yeah, so I'm seeing 3s, I'm seeing 2.5s, I'm seeing 2s right now for Minnesota, Cleveland. The Browns favored in all of those. And boom, 2 just went to 3. And the 2.5 just went to 3. Literally, I'm watching it in real time. So there's money showing for Cleveland as we speak here on air against Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell had been 0-6 straight up, 1-5 ATS in August. And they rallied from double digits behind in the second half to steal a win in their preseason debut. I think it was 24-23 final. You know, J.J. McCarthy, everyone's thrilled because he threw a couple of big touchdown passes. They were chucking the ball downfield, worth noting that. Kevin O'Connell, quote, clearly everyone can see the arm talent. I just love seeing him come right back after the interception, still be aggressive and stay true to the footwork, timing, rhythm, where his arms should, or where his eyes should be. So a positive sign for Minnesota. Maybe a QB rotation that's bet on, but not a head coach who's necessarily shown a whole lot of signs that he is all that interested in winning games in August. Cleveland, last week they took money. They have the quarterback rotation that everyone likes, you know, with veterans in the second half. And guys who can make plays with their feet in the second half. You know, you like Thompson Robinson's a guy I'm very comfortable putting my money on in the second half of a pre-game. And he's not the only one for Cleveland in that regard. We talk about backup QBs who you can trust. We like Tyler Huntley. We like Jameis Winston. All right. For August, not always for September, but for August, we like these guys. So I'm not surprised again that the Browns take money. And the Browns sat their starters. The Packers paid theirs. The Packers only played theirs for 3 plays before they scored a big play touchdown and then benched them. But the fact that Cleveland basically sat most of their key guys last week and they have the QB rotation that people like, I'm not surprised that the first bets have come for the Browns in this one. They were a popular choice again last week. And O'Connell for Minnesota has been a guy who's cared a whole lot about winning games at this time of the year.
From Cleveland to South Florida, next up, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, Washington at Miami. Teddy, seeing anywhere from pick'em to -1. That's the Dolphins at home, 37 the total in Hard Rock.
Yeah, and again, this is another total that's been bet up. There was a 1.5 out here earlier for Miami. Now it's pick or -1. So there's been a little bit of Washington money at the open. Both teams coming off solid performances. But again, wins and losses in August, you don't worry about too much about that. I want to note the Mike McDonald quote that I referenced earlier, saying, quote, we had some defensive players play out of position because of some depth issues. So it was good to see our guys get a win in front of the home fans. Cluster injuries are something to pay attention to in August. Miami has defensive concerns right here. That's something to pay a lot of attention to this week. And I think that may well be what some of the money has come for Washington at the opener. Of course, the Commanders played well in their preseason debut. And really, you're talking a fair bit about Jaden Daniels, who's going to get lots of playing time this August. Jaden Daniels played well in this past week against the Jets. Quote, I feel like it just gives everybody confidence moving forward. Obviously, not just me, Dan Quinn. Jaden, I thought, had a real command of things. It was a great first day for him. And when you have a QB, a rookie QB, he's going to get ample playing time here. You would expect to see things like offensive line starters, skill position talent play a little bit longer for Washington. So Daniels has a chance to work with the first stringers. That tends to be a bet-on situation, and that could be another reason why we're seeing some of this. Again, you don't want to over-exaggerate it. It's 1 or 2 bettors, but we have seen some early money for Washington. That could be what they're looking at. Washington's a bet-on, potentially because the starters might play longer than Miami's, and Miami's cluster injuries on the defensive side of the football could be a concern as well.
Next one up, we got Buffalo at Pittsburgh, 4 o'clock Pacific time. We got 36, 36.5, 37 all out there for the total. Some a big over move in this one, Teddy. We got -3. That's the Steelers across the board as the home favorite hosting the Bills.
Yeah, so one thing I don't look in the preseason is I don't do look-aheads. So I'm not interested. I'm worried about who the team's going to play next week. And this is my single most disappointing matchup because I think both these teams are bet on for this game. And the fact they're playing each other. There aren't that many teams. And I'm like, this happened last week. I would expect something different this time around in terms of coaches' game plans, in terms of coaches' mentality. Certainly for a first half selection, I thought both these teams had bet on potential, but they're playing each other. Pittsburgh moved the ball, up and down the field for extended stretches of that game last week, but a lot of self-inflicted woes. They got across midfield twice with Justin Fields under center, but they had a fumbled snap that killed the drive. They had a bad sack where Fields held the ball too long that killed the drive. His quote after the game, quote, "We're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We can definitely be better." Kyle Allen set up the Steelers for an easy touchdown pass. Instead, they came up empty in the end zone. He missed a wide open receiver in the back corner of the end zone on fourth down. They got no points on that drive. Kyle Allen, quote, "Just had to give him a better ball. I threw it a little deep for him." Of course, the Steelers under Tomlin have been very much bet on in August, but so have the Bills under McDermott. When you talk about the coaches with the track records, you have Harbaugh in Baltimore, McDermott in Buffalo, Tomlin in Pittsburgh, all of whom have made their backers money both short and long term. Harbaugh not so much short term anymore. And both Tomlin and McDermott cost their backers, including me, money this past weekend. But long term, all three of those guys have been pretty strong bet on. Sean McDermott was not amused with what happened. Buffalo had a ton of penalties, a ton of pre-snap penalties. They did not have the same energy that Chicago did. And with the game on the line in the fourth quarter, they completely fell apart. It was so bad for Buffalo up front that McDermott, who sent out Josh Allen for a second series after a 3-and-out early, he pulled him midway through the series. All right. Quote, McDermott, "Our standard was not out there today. That's not how we play. If you had a blood pressure cuff on me during that game, it probably would have exploded." Me too, McDermott. They had 11 penalties in the contest. Quote, "We didn't control the line of scrimmage from the jump, all the way down to one of the last series we had on offense, trying to get a first down on 3rd and 1 and can't get a yard. That's where the challenge comes in. We've got to embrace that challenge. We got a whole lot of work to do." Buffalo might well be bet on this week. I'm surprised that early money's come against them, with Pittsburgh now -3 at most locations. Of course, the Steelers still do have that bet on QB rotation in theory, although we're talking about veteran QBs, but we're not talking about veteran QBs for the Steelers who've been in the system the way they have in recent seasons. So again, that's one that surprised me a little bit. I did not think we see the Bills get the Steelers get bet up from -2 to -3 off the get-go. Buffalo, they took a ton of money this last week. It was probably the biggest move of the week for the bookmakers. My clients and I were on the right end of that move. We got the Bills at +1.5. Didn't make that bet any better. True. Certainly not when it came to the final result.
For sure, Teddy. As we move down the list here, guys, it's a jam-packed Saturday night of NFL preseason. 6 games, all at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. Next one up, we got Arizona and Indianapolis, Teddy. We are seeing the Colts -3 in the hook now pretty much across the board. 38.5 being the total. Cardinals at Colts.
Yeah, so we're not going to see Kyler Murray at all in preseason. That's been officially determined, or that's what Jonathan Gannon said anyway. So we're not going to see Kyler Murray, which means we're going to see a fair bit of Desmond Ridder and Clayton Tune. And I don't know how to phrase this any other way. I'm sick of Desmond Ridder costing me money, dude. That guy freaking sucks. And he sucked last year in Atlanta, and he was just awful in the first half last week. Now, the offensive line wasn't good in front of him, but, 4 completions for 43 yards in the first half. And Gannon didn't blame his QB. Quote, "You like to get some first downs. That's not just the quarterback. That's everybody. He's not blocking for himself. He's not running routes for himself. So I think as a whole, we need to do better." But Arizona didn't really they weren't playing starters. But the Cardinals in the first half of that game were pretty rough. And Desmond Ridder was a big part of that problem. Clayton Tune out, in the first drive of the second half, Clayton Tune had more yards than Ridder did for the entirety of the first half of that ball game. He played fairly well and actually guided the team to a win, except that the defense couldn't hold it. And that's also worth noting for Arizona. We're not seeing a whole lot of defense. We're not seeing a defense that we can be confident is going to get stops in the second half of any of these games. They didn't. Indy played a wild shootout with Denver, and I'm not surprised at all that we've seen over money. Again, we're seeing big over money here. 35.5 to the open at the open. Now I'm seeing as high as 38.5 at DraftKings right now. So the Colts showing signs of being a over team. That defense allowed 32 first downs, more than 400 yards, and 38 minutes of possession in a game where they forced 3 turnovers. So worth noting this quote from Anthony Richardson, quote, "We're talking about that in the locker room at halftime. We're disappointed we didn't get more reps than that." There's time, of course, it was Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor on the field together, which in theory is supposed to be a dynamic duo for Indy. They didn't get a whole lot of opportunities in this one. Well, maybe we'll see more of the Colts starters. And of course, the first bet's coming for Indy, in part because we don't know if any, Arizona rested starters last week. I'm not anticipating we'll see a whole lot of them this week. Certainly not Murray and company. And for Indy, there is some urgency to get some of those starters on the field more. So those first bets have come for the Colts. No surprise in that regard.
Good breakdown, Teddy, as we're about halfway through here. Maybe chop it up a little bit. We got a bunch of comments, guys. Feel free to fire away in the live chat. Also comments below. Teddy, Chris B asking, have the new punt rules affected anything yet? Well, the new kickoff rules as well. We talked about it a little bit on last week's show, but didn't know if you noticed anything kind of week one, any rules changes that you think would affect betting in the NFL preseason right now?
So there was a safety in the Jags Chiefs game because the play. I mean, it was a really confusing spot where the guy he picked up the ball at the half-yard line and then went back into the end zone and took a knee. And at first, the refs ruled that put the ball out at the 25, and then they're like, no, you better review that. It ended up being a safety. So those kind of things, or at least there was one of those that happened this past weekend, and it was an under weekend. That's worth noting. Everyone's still learning the rules in terms of the nuances of the kickoff rules. All I can say, but right now, nobody knows squadouche. So it's the kind of thing that if you have an angle on it, pay attention to it. But for right now, I would not overreact to anything that we've seen from week one of the preseason when it comes to how scoring is going to be affected up or down based on the new touchback rules for kickoffs.
Okay, and Have Cash asking, any information on NFL teams that play back-to-back division games on the road or at home, dog or favorite? Like, do you notice teams playing, back-to-back home games in the NFL preseason, maybe being a little bit more of a bet on, or does travel matter a lot in your opinion?
So they don't play any division games in preseason. Travel's not really a factor. A lot of times they have joint practices all week, and then the starters sit for a game. And especially when we get into week 2 and week 3, you see more and more of that. So home field edge is worth effectively 0 in preseason. I mean, that's, it's probably worth a point and a half in the regular season, and preseason is not worth anything. But in terms of long-term trends, back-to-back road games, back-to-back home games, nothing that I'm aware of. If you know something, let me know, because I don't. That's not one that's ever been that stood out to me. And when it comes to betting preseason, and people are like, "Oh, this is what we saw last week. We expect to see it again." What you saw last week is what the coach was trying to accomplish last week with his game plan. You expect a different game plan week to week in the preseason. That's why these coaches' quotes are so important, and that's why I go through all of these recaps and try to find anything from coaches' quotes that points us in one direction or another.
Teddy, we got Seattle and Tennessee up next. By the way, thanks for the questions out there, guys. 419, 420, the game number here. 38 and a half being the total, -3. That's the Titans at home in Tennessee.
Yeah, I'll talk about this in a minute. We got to talk about this special, the 3-day, 7-day special at WagerTalk.com right now, where you buy 3 days for the price of 7. You can stack them up. You can buy 10 packages if you want and use them on different cappers. You can just use them on the same capper. But it's available on my page. It's available on Drew's page. Just visit the website, WagerTalk.com. And again, get a 7-day pass for the price of a 3-day pass. That's available right now, and that is a limited time offer at WagerTalk. When it comes to Seattle and Tennessee, we've seen a little bit of Titans money. The 2.5s at the opens are now 3. We've seen a lot of over money, 34.5 at the open, now 38/38.5. And, Tennessee beat San Fran, a game that stayed under. Their offense didn't do all that much. They had a pair of big special teams play that led to basically a pair of scores for the Titans. Will Levis leading a pair of touchdown drives on his series. Another quote, we had no penalties till the second half. That was cool to see. We got a couple things we've got to clean up, but that was our number one goal. And I feel like we did a good job. That's Levis talking about the offense. Quote, guys were up and on their stuff. I felt well protected out there. Tennessee's offensive line, very much a question mark coming into the season. And yet the offensive line held up well. Although San Fran, they were an absolute no-show in that game in a big sense. We saw it in the betting market move. We'll talk about the Niners in a few minutes, but they got their fair share of cluster injuries. Seattle got a 16-3 win against a no-show Chargers team. The Chargers, too, didn't bring a whole lot to the table. The betting markets are saying, don't take anything from Seattle, anything away from Seattle in that game. They faced a team that, we'll talk about the Chargers in a minute, too, but their quarterback play was awful in that contest. It's not like Seattle marched the ball up and down the field. It's not like they have a quarterback rotation that bettors are particularly excited about. Hence, some of the early Titans money and a whole lot of over money based, and again, in part on Tennessee's play, in part on the offensive line for Tennessee that looked good in that first outing.
Next 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern kick here. New York Jets, Carolina Panthers, 34 being the total, Teddy, -3. That's the Jets as the road favorite.
And the Jets don't care, which tells you how bad Carolina is regarding the betting markets right now in the preseason. The Jets don't care one bit. We saw that very clearly in the opener. And again, they found a way to stick around and make things interesting. But, we're not going to see any Aaron Rodgers in this ball game. We're not going to see Rodgers in the first 2. Robert Saleh said he's not going to see him in the first 2 preseason games. We could see him in the finale against the Giants. But that plan, quote, hasn't been finalized. And for the Jets, once Tyrod Taylor goes out, it's not like it's a bet on QB rotation. It's all again to the Jets. All the Jets want to do in the preseason is get guys a couple of reps and avoid injuries. So that's meaningful. That being, and that's meaningful when we talk about -3. Dave Canales, after the pretty ugly loss at New England in his preseason debut. Of course, they didn't play any first teamers. They may not play any first stringers in this game either. Quote, tonight was about our first time guys, the rookies, the guys that haven't had a chance to play in the NFL. I think what they found tonight is it's just football. They ran and they played hard. For me, it was a great opportunity to be able to talk to the coaches, talk to the officials. It was great reps for me just to get that flow, how the communication happens, and being able to work all through that. That is not a bet on quote for the preseason, in my opinion, from Canales. That's a quote that's saying, I'm a rookie. I need my reps too. Hence, Jets -3 in a game they don't care about. And again, we talk about everything's being bet over. This one, not so much. 33.5 at the open, 34 right now. And that could easily been a move on air.
Another low total up next here, Teddy. Battle for Los Angeles. We get the LA Rams, LA Chargers, 33 and a hook being the total. -1 or pick 'em. The -1s are mostly on the Rams here, but not sure about a home field advantage. I guess there isn't any in preseason either way, but battle for Los Angeles here, Teddy.
Yeah, so, we had 60 minutes of Stetson Bennett for the Rams, the former national championship winner out of Georgia. And he threw 5 picks in that ball game, but the 5th one was negated by a defensive holding call, and lo and behold, then Easton Stick then Stetson Bennett in the last 2 minutes of the game, down the field into the end zone. Tough beat if you had Dallas in that contest. He finished 24-38, 224. Bennett's quote, that was probably the weirdest game that I've been a part of. I told myself today we're going to roll with the punches. My goal was not to make any mental errors. It was basically to run the offense correctly. There were some lapses, obviously, being that I threw 5 interceptions, one of which was negated. But in the end, it was get the ball in the end zone or you lose, and I think everybody fought to do it. So this is Sean McVay who doesn't care. All right. And McVay's quote, obviously we want to be able to minimize the turnovers, but it didn't really surprise me. We're talking on the headset as coaches. It's like, you know what? He's the type of guy who's probably going to go lead us on a game-winning touchdown drive. And Stetson did a great job doing that. So, the Rams, it's hard for me to put my money on the Rams in August. They don't care. And while their defensive performance yesterday was better than anything last year, where they gave up 30-plus in all 3 games, that had everything to do with Dallas. Maybe more to do with Dallas than it did with anything the Rams were trying to do. They played vanilla football. So the Chargers are kind of in the same boat. I mean, I don't expect, we're not going to see Herbert in the preseason. Most of the starting offense got playing time in that ball game. All right, just the running backs and the quarterback. The receivers were out there, the offensive line was out there, and they still couldn't get the job done. All right, Easton Stick was pretty awful in that contest. He was 5 of 13 for 32 and a pick, 8 series in the first half, and he had starters in for many of them. Quote, that was frustrating. I think it's a combination of things, but ultimately not executing at a high level to move the football. It starts and ends with me. Oh, by the way, Chargers are signing quarterbacks. Luis Perez got signed this past week, which tells everyone, and Harbaugh even said it after the game, I'm not pleased with our quarterback room right now. We need more competition. So maybe there's a little bit more urgency for the Chargers than the betting marks are thinking. I know this. Rams -1. I ain't laying points with the Rams in a preseason game. So it's LA or pass a priori for this better.
Teddy, Luis Perez, that's what the USFL guy. He was pretty good in that league. Does that change anything? Like, do you think he'll actually get time in this game, or not really? It's just kind of there filling out the room.
Oh no, I would absolutely expect him to get time in this game.
Okay,
if he knows the offense well enough to do it.
In a bet on, or maybe not so much with him. And any opinion there? Because he did have success in like those that I guess lesser of a league.
So I'm not going to call him a bet on quarterback in a situation where, and yeah, he was in there. He was on the field this past week. He went 5 for 12 for 61 yards. He was not a bet on QB in the sense of he's only been on the roster for a week, so he doesn't know the offense, doesn't know anything. It's not a bet on scenario. That being said, he can play.
Yeah,
and
something to watch.
The more important thing is we signed a quarterback. Let's light a fire under somebody's ass, because all y'all are going to get cut. And basically, reading between the lines from Harbaugh post game, he was not pleased with the play of his backups or his third stringers. So maybe there's a little bit more in terms of the quarterback position. There could be more urgency there this week.
Like it, Teddy. 425-426 up next. 4:30 Pacific kick here as this will be the 7th game going all at the same time. Tampa Bay and Jacksonville. We're seeing the Jags -3 at most shops. There is a prominent -4 out there in the global market. 38 being the total. Bucks at Jags here. Battle for Florida.
Yeah, a lot of Jacksonville money. And they were betting against Tampa last week as well. Todd Bowles, quote, we got our first game under our bets. A lot of guys played for the first time. For the most part, it was sloppy. There are a few things we need to clean up, but we made progress. I mean, that's as standard a coach's quote as you're going to find from anyone. Bowles is not a guy who's all that worried about wins at this time of the year. The betting markets are telling us that very clearly. The Jags, we talked about their special teams, how the special teams kind of dominated against Kansas City and set up 3 different scores for them. Won that game by doubles, but it's not like Jacksonville. There's urgency here for them either necessarily. The betting markets are expecting more Jacksonville starting action than Tampa starting action in this game. That's why we're seeing the early money come for the Jags. When it's number 1s against number 2s, the market's like the number 1s. Although, again, in the second half, it's number 3s against number 3s and number 3s and 4s against number 3s and 4s. And again, that's when the vast majority of points spread outcomes are determined. Nonetheless, the markets always react to a scenario where one team isn't necessarily going to play starters, and this may be that situation here with the Bucs and the Jags. I don't have that for fact, but it doesn't appear like Bowles is going to give his starters a whole lot of playing time this August.
We got the Saturday nightcap up next, 7 o'clock Pacific, not far from where TC's talking right now. It's the Las Vegas Raiders, -7 at most shops. There is a 6 and a hook out there. That's the Raiders as the home favorite. 36.5 being the total here, Teddy. It's Cowboys at Raiders, singled out final game on Saturday night. What are we thinking here?
Yeah, so the Raiders have already taken a ton of money in this game. It was 3.5 at the open. Now we're 6.5, 7. And Dallas doesn't care. All right, Mike McCarthy is not worried about winning games in August. Their preseason track record is pretty miserable. If you bet on the Dallas Cowboys in recent years in August, you've lost money. Trey Lance, again, the stats say okay. I was not impressed with Trey Lance in that ballgame. He threw for 188 yards in his first game as a Cowboy. 4 field goals. Quote from Lance, I think I learned a ton from it. I played with a bunch of different guys. It's good to feel the energy in the huddle. Of course, he came on with the second series of the ballgame and played the rest of the way. Quote, I left some plays out there for sure across the board in the first quarter to the fourth. Anytime we get 4 extra possessions, don't score a touchdown, that's not a good feeling. Mike McCarthy, quote, we look like we played our first game. In other ways, I'm really pleased with the takeaways and taking care of the football. There's a lot to go off of. So Dallas, not a team the markets are excited. The Raiders, you want to talk about urgency, there's a quarterback battle here. There's a quarterback battle. Oh, by the way, Antonio Pierce said this morning that his goal is to announce the starter after this game. Quote, we got to get ready to play football. I think we got enough film. We'll have 2 games here by then to evaluate both quarterbacks and see how they play. I thought both guys were efficient. There were some opportunities that Minshew made down the field that were really good. It was a clean pocket, man. You can see what this offense could be with both guys. So the quarterback competitions for starter always attract a lot of betting market attention. Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and the starter being announced after the game this week. There's certainly urgency for the Raiders, and that is now officially factored into the point spread. The 3.5s at the open, again, 6.5, 7s right now. The betting market didn't sleep on this one this line moved like that off the opener that I saw. So lots and lots of Raiders money in a situation where you would expect the Raiders money to come.
Saturday's games in the books, guys. We'll turn the page to Sunday, August 18th. We got a doubleheader here. Well, 5 o'clock Pacific kick. We get New Orleans and San Francisco, Teddy. We are seeing Saints -2 in the hook, -3 as the road favorite, 36 being the total.
Here's the quote. Here's the quote. With injuries mounting, the San Francisco 49ers have made a significant adjustment to their preseason schedule, announcing they've canceled their planned joint practices with the New Orleans Saints. 23 players didn't practice last week, and then the injury bug hit during the preseason opener again. Cornerback Emory Thomas got hurt in that game. That's going to keep him out for an extended period of time. This is an injury-riddled team. We talked about some of the rules for betting preseason last week on this show, and near the top of that list was when teams have cluster injuries in any position, they become bet against. The 49ers are being bet against right now. -2.5 at the open, +2.5 as we speak. That's a 5-point line move in the last couple hours against San Fran. They're canceling the joint practices. The injuries are a concern for San Francisco. Tons of guys have been held out of practice. Yet, for a team that wants to be playing meaningful games in January, these guys aren't going to see the field in August. The Saints, they have a backup quarterback battle, and we like that, certainly in terms of Jake Hayner versus Spencer Rattler. Rattler led them down the field for the game-winning score after they blew the lead in the fourth quarter against the Cardinals. But Derek Carr, again, not pretty in that contest. Saints offensive line, not pretty either. New Orleans, there was some urgency there potentially, but -2.5 urgency. Again, San Fran's bet against. I'm not convinced New Orleans is bet on.
All right, Teddy, we got one game left here for Week 2 NFLX, and it is 4-3-1, 4-3-2, 5 o'clock Pacific kick. We get Green Bay Packers, Denver Broncos. One of the heaviest favorites on the Week 2 slate here, Teddy. -7 with juice on that number. So laying a touchdown at home, 39 or 40. One of the higher totals as well. It's the Packers at the Broncos, Teddy.
Yeah, and this is all the last couple hours. The line's open anywhere, Pacific time. 5, 6, 7 o'clock this morning. We're sitting at 4.5 as late as 8 a.m. I think it's a quarter after 8 Pacific time. Now it's a full touchdown. So when you see these lines start to go in August, they don't stop until they hit something. This one hit 7. 7 juice to the over now with Denver against Green Bay. Money came against Green Bay this last week, even though the Packers played starters and the Browns sat theirs. Matt LaFleur quote, "We just wanted to get their feet wet a little bit, knock some rust off. It's always good to not only go out there and play, but just a preparation mentally to play a game." I would expect to see more of that from Green Bay here, although the starters only played on offense 3 plays in that contest. Those 3 plays led to a big play touchdown. Even if we may not see much more of the Packers starters this week, and certainly Denver, who had a week 1 preseason high 34 points, week 1 preseason high 32 first downs, week 1 preseason high 410 total yards, week 1 preseason high 6 red zone trips, week 1 preseason high 38 minutes of possession. They had the best offensive game of any team this past week, and they too have a quarterback battle when it comes to Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix. They split the work with the starting offense evenly over the last 11 training camp practices. Stidham got the start against Indy. Nix expected to get the start, potentially getting the start this week, although we could see the same scenario as well, where Stidham goes with the starters and then Nix goes with the backups. Nonetheless, Denver with the QB battle. Green Bay, the markets don't like the Packers right now. I'm not shocked that this line moved significantly and over money came in as well. That being said, I don't think it goes any higher. At 7.5, there'll be buyback for Green Bay. We're not going to see 7.5s in the preseason are few and far between, and I don't expect to see one here. We could, but I'll take the under on how many 7.5s actually last on the board. Even if one pops up for a minute, someone's going to come out there and take it.
He's Teddy Covers, WagerTalk.com. Buy 7 days for the price of 3 right now. Check out Teddy. I'm Drew Martin as well. You get MLB, you get NFLX as well, guys. So a great deal there. WagerTalk.com, no coupon code needed. 4 days free. TC, great stuff as always, man. I'll throw it back over to you. Any final thoughts before we shut it down?
Yeah. Our final thoughts. So I had a crappy week 1 of the preseason. I already did. Nothing broke. Literally nothing broke right for me this last week. We lost a 5% play on Buffalo, and the final score was awful. Even though I swear, fourth quarter of that game, we had a chance to win and cover. We really did, despite how bad that final score looked. But when you have a bad weekend in the NFL, what do? It's important to remember this, because you're going to have some point this season, you're going to have 1, you're going to have 2. It's going to happen. A bad weekend, breathe, take a break, and then come back and do your work. It's just that simple. It's not I suck at everything, let's overreact and not play any bets ever again. It's not, I got to play everything, I got to double check 6,000 things. Keep doing what you're doing. Recognize that variance sometimes will work against you. Recognize sometimes you're going to have a shitty weekend. And come back and get it back the next week. That's what we do. Thanks for watching. Appreciate all the comments, all the likes. Drew and I both going to get in the comments this week and reply just like we did last week. And, of course, all of you thousands and thousands of you watching every week. If you like this show, please tell a friend. We appreciate it very much. That's all I got, Drew.
Like it, Teddy. Well said, guys. Teddy Covers, Drew Martin, checking out for week 2. We'll be back Monday. Come back and join us for NFL Opening Line Report, week 3 of the NFL preseason. For Teddy Covers, Drew Martin, checking out. Smash that like button, comment below, guys. Fire away any questions. Thanks for tuning in. Cash those tickets.